You're listening to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, Episode 12.
Think about what it is and see if you can exhaust every possible resource to solve a problem. And if you still can't figure it out, then at least when you go to your manager or you go and ask the question or you're stuck, you can at least show what you've done. I think that there's a lot of hands that get thrown up in the air and just like, I don't know how to do this. And then it's just like, well, then what's the role that you're filling and what's your value?
Hey everyone, this is Eric Huey, host of the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, where we interview and learn from millennials who are leaders in their fields. These are individuals who have started their own businesses, have a high-ranking title within companies, or are simply pursuing non-traditional means, such as their passion or hobby, to support themselves and their families. There still exists this negative stigma around our generation that we are entitled, lazy, and unreliable. So my goal is to prove that wrong, while also inspiring millennials to become the best versions of themselves and go after their big goals. Hello. Thanks for listening to another episode. Welcome back to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. Today's interview is with Ryan Malec, who is actually a coworker of mine at Informa. Ryan is our Digital Innovation and Strategy Director for Infrastructure Intelligence Division. And today's conversation is going to be all about climbing the corporate ladder, which is, of course, a very popular saying in the business world today. Ryan is going to help us break down this quote-unquote climbing. Metaphorically speaking, climbing can be seen as quite the undertaking, quite the journey, right? I mean, sometimes you don't know where you're climbing. You don't know how long you need to climb or how many other climbers will be there when you get to the top. But what if you could build your own ladder, so to speak? That's exactly what Ryan has done for himself at Informa. Informa is now the largest B2B media company in the world, and it takes a ton of time and effort to get to a high-level leadership position within the company. Ryan has been through 7 promotions and multiple company acquisitions. He's got a great story on how to navigate the corporate environment and rise to the top of the ranks. Here's my interview with Ryan Malec. Ryan Malec, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're a K-State guy, right?
I am, yes. K-State alum, looking good, 2-0 at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Try to keep up with them. But looks like they're looking good. They're seated. I mean, obviously now being 2-0, I think they're top, but I think they had one of the top power rankings coming in, didn't they?
Yeah, it was a little sketchy with the new coach coming in, but
right.
So far so good.
Good. Well, Fingers crossed for them for the season. It'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely.
You had a couple friends go there. They always talked about Aggieville. That seems like the place to hang out.
Oh yeah, that's the place you want to go for sure. Just make sure that you have a ride home.
Right.
Yeah.
Safety first, folks.
That's
Safety
right.
first.
That's right.
Good tip. Well, appreciate you joining me today. Today's conversation's all about proving yourself up the corporate ladder. Within that topic, I'd just love to, give some value to the listeners as far as how you've managed to stay at one company this whole time, and then also how you've managed to get some promotions and things like that. So that's kind of the all-encompassing topic for the day. But if you're ready, we can just dive on into some questions.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So if you could just explain for the listeners who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Ryan Malec, and I am the Senior Digital Innovation and Strategy Director for the DES, which is the Design, Engineering, and Sourcing group inside of the Business Intelligence Unit inside of Informa. So there's a lot of layers inside of this company, but essentially I work for one business unit and do a lot of product development, product execution, product management, do a little selling. Kind of a jack of all trades is I guess how I could frame it.
And is that what you studied at K-State as marketing? Or
I have a marketing degree and was fortunate enough to have a roommate or two along the way that were computer science majors, and so have a little bit of knowledge on how things work from a technical perspective, enough to allow me to see the possibilities of things.
Sure, yeah, it's a great double-edged sword to have.
Yeah.
So why do you do what you do? It's a question I always ask guests on the show is, what's your why, quote unquote?
For me, I like to see an idea that starts on a whiteboard or a napkin and have it just take flight and actually turn into something that is a multi-million-dollar idea that makes everyone happy, makes the company we work for happy, makes the customer happy, and makes the user who stands in between us happy when they're using it. And for me, that's where a lot of the value comes from.
Definitely. On that note, are there any projects in particular that you're most proud of? Could be recent, could be years ago.
Yeah, I think that some of the ideas around, when content marketing started to become real big several years ago, we cooked up some ideas from some of our biggest customers on how to produce content for them that's going to, position them as thought leaders, and then, all of the marketing automation that's attached to that. So as people engage with it, reaching them in various ways that allows our customer to have that communication in a technical way, in a smart way based on user behaviors and stuff. So I feel good about that one because we were a little bit ahead of the curve from B2B standards, not so much for B2C, but at that point we were advanced.
Sure.
So that's kind of the feather in the cap.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good one. So kind of give the listeners a brief overview of your career and maybe your 10 years here, and kind of maybe briefly touch on each position and, maybe what's kept you here.
Sure, yeah. So I graduated in 2008 from Kansas State, which is in the middle of, a terrible time to find a job.
Yeah, no doubt.
I played cards for a living, poker. Didn't want to work a job.
The Maverick.
Loved it actually. But honestly, I felt as if my parents had, gave me a great opportunity. They were, I was fortunate enough to have them pay for my college and had absolutely zero debt, which I realized how lucky I am, and just felt like I needed to actually do something with it. And in hindsight, it was a great move because shortly after I decided to enter into the job market and started a job here, then the online poker industry completely went upside down, and that would not have been a great place for me to be.
Yeah.
With no experience, and if you spend too much time out of college without a job, it's not the greatest on a resume either. So that landed me here. I started as an email specialist, is what it was called. So basically someone who takes emails, builds templates, and just churns them out all day long, looking to probably complete 25 to 30 different templates a day.
Dang.
And position the audience and target them and so on and so forth.
That's right, when email marketing was getting pretty hot, wasn't it?
Yeah.
2008, 2009?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was, it was starting to really be a part of everyone's strategy. I wouldn't say everyone was doing it in a smart way, but at that time it was, something great that was outside of the traditional, print models or the other ways of reaching folks. So, it was great. I learned a lot doing that role. It helped me understand a lot of the nuances behind the business, and honestly, a lot of what people in those churn and burn roles have to experience. And so from there, I moved into an audience development role, which is more about acquiring the audience that we ultimately monetize to our customer. And I got to learn a little bit more about what makes the audience tick. Which is crucial, especially now in the current role I'm in, which is around product development. So it's real good to have a good full lens, I guess, of what the audience wants, what the customer wants, and then we sit in the middle as the business into, how to appease both and make money off of that.
Right.
So between those two, it kind of allowed me to see things and come up with ideas. And so a couple salespeople kind of sunk their teeth into me and said, hey, can we do this? And, the answer they were always being told was no. And I'm saying here, telling them, yeah, it's possible to do this. It's not that hard. And so we started to go that route, and it opened doors for me to kind of move over into the business side of the fence. And that's kind of where I've been now, and have just been able to keep climbing.
Yeah, very cool. Sounds like a cool opportunity. Is it safe to say that you were asking for forgiveness more than permission at that point, when you were telling those sales guys that you could do certain things that they'd previously been told that couldn't be done?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I want to be careful saying that too. I don't want to motivate a bunch of people to break rules outside their companies or something.
Right,
but I mean, there's definitely a degree of that where you have parameters and criteria and red tape, and sometimes it's, you have to think critically about how to solve problems, and sometimes it's just better to go do them. In certain places and prove it, because if you wait and ask for permission, things will just never get done.
Yeah. Would you say that's one of the main factors that's allowed you to be successful in terms of climbing up your position to position?
Most definitely. I would say without a doubt it's been one of the key elements. I think along the way I've had to learn a balance of what's too far, and how to work with teams and give people heads up on what you're trying to do. but still moving forward with things. But definitely it's been a huge part of it.
Any other factors that you think have played a role in your success?
Yeah, I think that in this company, I think that aligning yourself with team members that can really help you get things done is key. I think that's the same thing in any job, but just having an appreciation for a we and not an I can get you moving quicker and faster, and helps you in your career personally more than if you take kind of a self-fulfilled role. So understanding who the players are, understanding who is gonna help me accomplish things, and do it in the right way, and don't be a dictator or a commander, but be a team player, I think is the biggest thing I could tell anybody.
So in a similar vein of thinking, what's allowed you or what's motivated you to stay here for 10 years? Because people say that's millennials that are the job hoppers, but I think personally it's just the cultural standpoint that people job hop nowadays, and there's not as much loyalty from the employee to the employer and vice versa. So what's your take?
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I wouldn't lie to you and say that I haven't thought the same thing about staying here for as long as I have. Being of the younger generation, I've seen a ton of people come and go. I've been told many times I'm a fool for staying this long, and that I should be bouncing around every 2 to 3 years. That's a better move, and there's something to be said for that. I think I'm just grounded. I think that there's a lot of grass is greener mentalities that folks have. I try and look at other things that are, I guess you could call them intangibles, but they're things like quality of life. What's my work-life balance? Do I get fulfillment out of my job here? Do I like the people I work with? Is there something new that's always around the horizon that I could chase? Do I have the voice of folks around me or above me that are going to give me that opportunity? And if you start over and fresh somewhere else, I could, ramp up the pay scale or get a fancy title, but, you lose some of that, and you have to kind of start over. And there is something that's intriguing about that too, because that's a challenge as well. So I think that, are you a creature of comfort, or do you want to continue to challenge yourself? But for me, in the history of this company, there's been so many acquisitions that have occurred here, and so many changings at the guard, that within the 10 years I've been here, it's been a new company that's reinvented itself multiple times. And so each one of those iterations has allowed for a different mentality, a different approach, and has honestly allowed me to kind of navigate through and be a part of the new version of it, and insert myself in a way that's beneficial for myself and the business.
Right.
So I think those are the core reasons as to why that I've stayed here. It's just there's always something new. I think some people like change, other people don't, but that change that I would get out of leaving to another job and challenging myself has happened just naturally and organically inside of this organization.
Right.
And I've gotten that fulfillment by staying.
Definitely.
So I think that the other part of it is just the industry we're in is digital marketing itself, and everything surrounding it is changing so rapidly that there's always something new to chase and something to go after. And being a part of a large company like this one that has a lot of resources, has a lot of other business units that are doing other things you can steal from or brainstorm around, have that hive mind or network ability is intriguing to me as well.
Yeah, it seems like whatever position you could have at another company right now, especially in media or marketing, to where you could execute on a brand new project, you could essentially create here from scratch and implement it yourself, which you've done countless times already. So I think you're in a good spot for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So it's kind of a good segue into the next topic, and that is topic of lifelong learning in general. I feel like continuing education is so important to so many careers, but especially in digital marketing. How do you manage to kind of stay on that cusp of what the next hot thing is, what the next trend is, especially from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe a little different than other folks. I think a lot of people read stuff, or they're constantly trying to educate themselves with books or resources. I do some of that, but that's not my go-to. My go-to is being in front of the customer. I think I straddle a hybrid role, or the way I approach it is different than others in a kind of a product role, is that I sit in front of the key customers and have been able to establish some great relationships with their strategic folks to understand what they're doing. Because if these, multi-billion-dollar companies that are investing in marketing automation, and they have a go-to market strategy to push, through the buyer's journey to purchase a product, they got it figured out. And they're going to constantly try and do whatever they can to stay ahead of the curve instead of in front of their competition. So to understand what they're doing, and riffing back and forth on how we can match up with them, or work together in unison to do those things, is a lot of where some of the innovation comes from, and it allows me to kind of think how we should do things differently. It's not a script per se, but it makes my mind think about, like, well, how can we do what they're doing, or how can we steal something from them, and apply it to us and what we do. On the same vein as that, I would also say that for me personally, like, my mind is always working that way. So even when I'm on the internet looking at stuff that, it's outside of work, or watching TV or whatever it may be, I'm always trying to look at it from, like, the marketing lens or the digital marketing lens. It's like, how are they accomplishing these things? Anything from an email that hits my inbox to, something targeted on a website that it comes to me, like, where did they get this information? And, more importantly, like, how are they using it? I think, to talk about automation and to talk about, behaviors and things like that is easy for anyone to do, but to do it in a smart way where it's not intrusive and it's beneficial to you as the user or the potential customer. I just try and observe those things and understand, like, what's going to piss me off, or what's going to get me to buy something, and try and filter in between. I think if you were to look at any, like, things specific that I read or check into, I mean, there's, some of the Gartner stuff out there is great. There's a lot of good business insights that they release that you can get some, like, full scale business insights for B2B marketing trends, or, I mean, for any industry pretty much they offer it. And that will allow you to see things like where people are spending their money, where they're gravitating towards. So then you can, at least for me, I position my thinking in, well, how can we innovate in these areas, because this is where the money is swirling around.
Right.
And then there's some other random newsletters and stuff that people have told me about over the course of time, which, one of them is like strategyandbusiness.com. So, I mean, no personal plug for them. I'm not affiliated or anything, but when I have the chance, I'll check it out. I think also too that, some free resources out there are good if you can filter the product pitch out of them. I mean, even stuff like the Marketos of the world and things like that, they release great blogs and things like that you can pick up things from. And then LinkedIn is another great tool, is just start to find influencers on there that, talk about areas that are important to you. And if you follow them, I mean, some of these folks are extremely smart, way smarter than me. Yeah. And so, just listen to what they've done and what they're going to do and steal. I mean, I have no shame in saying, stealing ideas is the name of the game. I mean, just take what someone else has done and reapply it.
Yeah, I heard some good quote once. I forget who said it, but it was something along the lines of, the best artists aren't artists, they're thieves.
Yep.
They mimic each other's, styles and tactics, and, build art pieces that are just as popular, if not more popular.
I could totally agree, or at least I do agree.
Yeah. So kind of going back to a point you mentioned earlier, as far as the company being acquired multiple times now. So I feel like it's one thing to stay at a company 10 years. It's one thing to not only stay at a company 10 years, but get promotions every 2 to 3 years along the way. And it's a whole nother layer to do both of those while the company is getting acquired. So explain maybe how you navigated those situations when those acquisitions came about, and how you wound up always on the beneficial side.
Yeah, sure. So I think that, in all honesty, I think there's a little bit of luck that was involved in the timing.
Lady luck never hurts.
Yeah, never hurts. In the era we talked about earlier, in that 2008 to 10 range, when digital marketing really started to take flight, within the B2B world at least, there was a changing of the guard, as I guess is the best way to describe it, and they were looking for people who are innovative and thinking in that direction, and that's just kind of what my DNA was. And so the doors were open to walk through and step through. I just kind of had to prove myself along the way to get there. And I think that one of the greatest ways or ways I remember to do that is just constantly being able to work to get to goals. If I said I was going to do something, or someone mentioned, like, is there a problem that can be solved? It's not just, being a person that can raise your hand and throwing up an idea. It's about, can you actually go and do it? And, I can remember a few times, like, working here till, 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And, like I mentioned earlier, where you want to surround yourself with people and teammates that you can trust and bond with. I had a coworker that was in the Fort Collins office that I'd never even met before, but she was willing to help me and stay with me and grind it out for hours, and we solved a problem that ended up being a huge, success point of my career. And you know what? That person was on a completely different team in another instance of the business. So it's just those kind of things that can help you kind of be a pin on the map that separate yourself. And someone takes notice that you did this once. Can you do it again? And can you be consistent and be reliable? I think that's one of the key things I learned along the way to kind of constantly move up is, can I be reliable? Can I always deliver? Not to say that everything's always going to be a success, because that's just not how it works. But if someone comes to you with something, are you that person that they want in the room, that you're going to add value to the conversation? Mm-hmm. I think the second part about that last comment too is just one of the key learnings I've always had is, like, stay in my lane. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes that it's easy to, when you start to move quickly and move up, that you want to start to try and spread yourself around and have more of an impact or get more spotlight or whatever the initiative that someone may have is. But I think I just try not to talk. I try not to raise my hand to get noticed. I try and just add value where I can and stay in the areas and level of expertise that I have, and that's worked for me.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think one flaw of our generation is that we sometimes have trouble saying no to things. So that was one point I was curious about and wanted to ask you, as far as when you're trying to prove your worth, you're raising your hands. Yeah, I can do that. I'm going to set this goal and I'm going to execute on that. I'm going to hit it. At what point, or I guess how do you differentiate between a realistic goal that can be accomplished when someone comes to you and says, yeah, we want to do this, versus saying, no, that's like, we don't need to be spending time on that, or that's not realistic?
Yeah, it's definitely something that took me a long time to learn. I mean, I would even say is pretty recently. I still struggle with it. The nature of who I am, the person I am, even outside of work, is I'm always going to be a helper, a doer, to try and lend my hand to help somebody. And so, especially when I was hungry early in the career and I wanted to move up, I wouldn't say no. And I would just grind and work as hard as I could. And
a couple of those midnight hour things, huh?
Yeah, and I would just figure out a way to get something done, even if I didn't know how to do it. When I told them, I would figure it out. And that's dangerous to do that, especially if you're in work environments that are a little bit more hostile and bigger things are on the line if you can't deliver. So yeah. I think that learning those things along the way and understanding, like, where the pushback is important. But I think that no matter what business you're a part of or what industry, I mean, everyone has intense goals. Everyone has intense KPIs that they have to hit. And at the end of the day, your managers and the executives are going to want you to hit those goals no matter what. And so sometimes, pressing back is something you can do to be a realist and say, like, we can't accomplish this because of a technical reason or whatever else. But if it's, to in my case, to hit a revenue goal through creating a product or something like that, if that idea doesn't work, then you better have a backup one and another one. Yeah. So, saying no is a part of it. I would rephrase it for me as setting expectations. Mm-hmm. So if somebody, has a $1 million goal for you, then, maybe your realistic expectation is $500,000 or something. So mm-hmm. That's the biggest learning that I've had along the way. And to always just be trying to think about what's the backup plan. If this doesn't work, then what's the next iteration, or what's the next way to take this thing that's going to allow you an opportunity. Yeah, that's great insight. I like what you said as far as agreeing to do something or saying that you can do something and then not actually knowing how, but going to figure it out. I think that's okay in some instances when the stakes aren't as high, because take a little risk, right? I mean, along with Lady Luck, like we talked about earlier, I think a little bit of risk
kind of lends a fair hand. Fortune kind of favors the bold.
I think so. I definitely think so. And I think after X amount of time here, I think I'm a little bit more cautious about doing that than I was earlier.
Yeah. Can pump the brakes a little bit more now.
I think I have a better understanding too of how to manage my own time better too.
Sure.
And to say, what's a priority? Am I going to have enough opportunity or a chance to, go learn something new from scratch and translate it into a whole business plan and a product? Probably not. Unless someone's going to say that this is a priority number one.
Right.
Most likely not. So I think that a lot of that plays into it. I think that also a key part of it is also, I've harped on it a couple times already, but it's the team thing. It's just understanding where your skill sets are, what you're really good at, and surrounding people around you that have the skill sets that help fill your gaps. And that can be how you can get more, become more efficient and get more out of, whatever the opportunity is or whatever the challenge is that's in front of you to solve it.
Sure. So I guess as we start to wrap up here, if someone out there listening has been in your shoes and trying to climb the ladder, so to speak, and prove their worth to their management team, what are some general tactics or tips that you would give them to do so?
Try and solve problems on your own before you ask questions, or try and go to your managers to ask questions. Think about what it is and see if you can exhaust every possible resource to solve a problem. And if you still can't figure it out, then at least when you go to your manager or you go and ask the question or you're stuck, you can at least show what you've done. I think that there's a lot of hands that get thrown up in the air and just I don't know how to do this, and then it's just well then what's the role that you're filling and what's your value. I think that the other thing too is just it helps tell your manager how you're going to be able to grow as a person. As far as are you going to be a critical thinker? Are you going to be self-sufficient? I mean, whenever I look to hire someone, I'm very honest with them during the interview process about asking them, are you a person that likes to be micromanaged, or are you a person that likes to be self-sufficient? And there's no right or wrong answer to the question, because people are going to be both. But for me personally, as a manager, I've never been micromanaged, and so that's just my nature and how I manage my employees. Mm-hmm. So I always like to set that expectation early. And the reason it relates to your question is because you have to know what type of manager you have, and you need to be able to adjust how you work with that person to create less friction, or even just present yourself as a better employee, more valuable. I think that's one of the key things that I would recommend anyone doing. And then also just understanding the business, trying to do a better job of be more well-rounded. I mentioned a couple times about standing in your lane for expertise, but it doesn't mean that you can't understand other facets of the business or understand other skills, because you never know if you, from your career perspective, if you want to pivot or jump to another job or another role, you can at least have an understanding. And if not, then you can start to think about things in a larger perspective, not just through one little small lens of something that you have.
Both great tips. Solve problems on your own and be well-rounded and understand different parts of the business. All right, well, final question then, Ryan. Where can people best get a hold of you if they want business or personal advice?
Yeah, I'd say the best way is to just find me on LinkedIn. Definitely put a link or something, a reference to it. I don't know how you do that, by the way.
Certainly. Yeah, I'll put it in our show notes and link to your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, that's the best way, though, is just to find me on LinkedIn, and then feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to have a conversation about something. I'm usually pretty active on there and checking stuff out.
Awesome. Ryan, thanks for your time and insights tonight. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
That wraps up today's episode. I want to thank you all again for listening. My name is Eric Huey, and my goal is to provide you with inspiring content that helps you do your job better or go after your big goals. I'd appreciate your feedback with a rating or review on whichever platform you found the show. And if you'd like to share your feedback directly, or if you know someone who would be a great guest on the show, feel free to email me directly at genwhyleaders@gmail.com. That's GENWHYLEADERS@gmail.com. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.